Hello, my name is Mette Brockmann, and for those who don't know me, I am like the Lena's hardworking partner in Nordic Bildung. I'm the head of the board. We had another workshop with the same theme entitled this morning, 12 hours ago or so, which was very practical about food production and how transforming the food system by a guerrilla movement is actually both Bildung, and it takes Bildung, and is a strong power to make a sustainable transformation. So for this one, this session, we will maybe take the helicopter a bit higher and see on the whole sustainability situation. I know that Paul will give us an overview of the situation where we are. I know that we have a lot of experts in the room, so feel free to make comments afterwards. It will be a very short presentation. Then we will be more practical with Kim's presentation about circular economy and how we ourselves can practice circularity as a sustainable act. And we will conclude with Joshua talking about, yeah, we'll see where that will end. I heard Joshua this morning about Indigenous traditions as a part of education and meta-modernity. And let's see where Joshua takes us with this circularity discussion. We'll do this short for 6 minutes or 8, but shortish, and then make space for a broader conversation with all the good people in the room. Paul, please introduce yourself and take the floor.
Hopefully you can all hear me. I am based in southern New Hampshire, and actually I help facilitate the North American Bildung group. So the focus of my talk is, in light of all the news about climate change, it's important that we embrace Bildung and make changes to our personal lifestyle to reduce our economic footprint. However, it's still important that we recognize the changes that have taken place. They're quite real. You know, the IPCC came out in August with an important update and report. It basically stated that we have tipped the balance of affecting our biosphere. Even if we cut our carbon emissions dramatically down to zero, we can expect to see our average global temperature rise by 1.5% over the next 30 years. So that was really the summary of that report. And the numbers vary slightly, but we are emitting upwards of 51 billion tons of carbon emissions each year, making this happen. And surprisingly, leading the way is when we make things, when we use cement, when we use steel, plastic, it accounts for 31% of our carbon emissions. And yes, certain companies are making changes. They're, replacing using a coal, for example, in steel, iron ore, and so they're reducing their carbon emissions, but we have a long way to go. But I really want to focus more on what we can do as an individual. And so this is quite stunning. I'm 54 years of age. When I was 18 years of age, I drove cross country. And I spent a lot of time in places like Lake Tahoe, California, San Francisco. And if you look at these pictures, this is quite stunning, right? The one on the left, top left, is from Lake Tahoe, a ski area. The one on the bottom left is San Francisco with wildfires in the distance. The one on the top right is Lake Mead, and where the historical high water mark was and where it is today. And then on the right is the awful Caldera fire that's going on out there. So I don't need to tell you that we've tipped the balance in the wrong direction. But after my discussion, Kim's going to go more into the benefits of circularity, and I recently took a course on this subject, and it's one of my favorite definitions of circularity is by Eva Gladek. And there's many definitions out there. There's one by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, but I think Eva Gladek summarizes it well, because what she basically says is we need to address human needs and make sure it's fairly distributed, but we have to do it without undermining the functioning of the biosphere and our planetary boundaries. And what she means by that is, here are the 9 planetary boundaries as defined by a group out of Stockholm. We've already violated 4 of the 9. So we've already tipped the scale. So it's just a matter of managing the damage done and keeping things under check. But one of the core things about circularity is it addresses waste in the system, and how we can go from a linear model to a circular model. And I go back to this slide, and it's quite stunning. I actually did a white paper on the fashion business, and I learned that out of 97% of our virgin feedstock, this is cotton, polyester, etc., we waste 73% of that stock. And so whether it ends up in a landfill or it gets incinerated, whether it's fast fashion or clothes in your closet that doesn't get worn, it gets thrown out, it's quite stunning when you really start to look at these models. And so we certainly have a lot of work to do in front of us. In addition, in addition to circularity, there's a lot we can do to reduce complexity in our lives. I read a recent book called The Day the World Stopped Shopping, and it focused on voluntary simplicity. And this was a movement that began in the 70s. It kind of waned, and now it's all of a sudden coming back, given what's going on. And I won't read the quote to you, but it's pretty self-evident that if we remove material wealth from our lives and we focus on simplicity, we'll rediscover nature and we'll get more connected to ourselves, much like the philosophy of Bildung. So it's certainly something to consider. And it not only reduces complexity, but it reduces your ecological footprint. And they've done studies on comparing people that practice voluntary simplicity compared to somebody who's frugal, tightwad with their money, or buys green. Voluntary simplicity wins hands down. So it's something to pay attention to. This is actually from a website called footprint.org. And at the end of my presentation, I'm going to give you a couple of links. It's a great link to go to because it's a site that allows you to establish a baseline. This happens to be a snapshot of the world. And as you can see, a lot of the areas in red, United States, Western Europe, Africa, Asia, China in particular, they're in the red. They've tipped the balance on resources, and they're scarce. And countries like Brazil and Scandinavia are still in the green, so there is some hope. But what's really amazing about this website is that it basically states that the world consumes, on average, 2.7 global hectares. That means 2.7 Earths are needed to sustain the lifestyle. What the globe can sustain is only 1.6. So we've already violated the 1.6. And just to give you a point of reference, the US tips the scales at 8. We require on average 8 global hectares. Whereas a country like Ecuador, if you were ever to go to Quito, they are a perfect 1. They consume and produce an equal amount. There's very little waste in their system. So it's something to observe and pay attention to as we look around at various lifestyles of different countries.
Okay.
I happen to go through the website myself, and I scored a pretty high number because I rely on oil to heat my house, which is fairly large, and we have 2 children, so a family of 4. But and quite honestly, it's pretty high. So I have some work to do in this regard, but it's worthwhile for all of you to go through it yourself and establish a baseline. And I'll give you some tips at the end.
Okay.
Yes.
You need to make your point and wrap
Yes.
up now, Paul.
And
Yeah?
so the ideas on reducing, I'm going to send out a Google Doc on things you can do to reduce your emissions. But here's some examples of things that I do at home, like bulk buying. I eliminate waste. I buy non-processed food, which is much more healthier for you. I use a company called Osprey on the right, and I send my pack in because they have all-time guarantee, and so they repair it, and so I don't have to buy anything new. These are just some of the things that you can do to introduce voluntary simplicity and circularity in your regimen. So I'll just leave you with this. So first thing you're going to need to do is go to one of these two sites to establish your baseline. I'll send you a link to a site to reduce your footprint and pick 3 ways to do that, and then share your practice with others. Because if you show them what you're doing, you're going to make a big impact. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I know that we later on in the session should discuss how we can actually make this a transformational movement, because I mean, sure, there's some people who really want us not to, because they want us to buy as many things and throw them out again as fast as possible. But let's turn our ears to Kim. I think you can proceed from here.
Yes, thank you. My name is Kim Hjerrild. I'm sitting here in Copenhagen. I'm heading a team of consultants, project managers working with circular economy and the advancement of circular economy in small and medium-sized companies. I have a background, among other things, as a Secretary General for the Danish Folk High School Association. So I'm quite familiar with, of course, dance at Bildung. It was a great pleasure for me that Lena reached out and asked if I could do this presentation. And what I'm going to talk about is actually some kind of thesis, some kind of early deliberations, thoughts about the connection between circularity and a local sustainable society, community, if you will. So these are really fresh thoughts I would like to discuss with you. And it's, yeah, let's get on with my presentation, because I think it will well suit well into this discussion. I hope so. So let's see if I can also browse in it. Thank you. Well, I don't know how much you know about circular economy and circularity, but just a few points on circularity. From a general view, the circularity and circular economy is, of course, about actually designing and deciding to get rid of all waste, that all resources should be reused at the highest economical value possible, stay in the economy, so to speak. There's 3 like overall principles in achieving that. One is narrowing, slowing, and closing. Narrowing and it goes in a number of ways, but narrowing, for instance, the number of materials we use, the amount of logistics of transport, and a whole lot of things that we in this industrial phase have gotten used to, increasing levels of complexity, and a lot of complexity today has to do with a very actually unsustainable way of producing, about what we in the fashion industry call the chase for the cheapest needle. So a lot of complexity has been introduced into our economy because of global competition, global value chains. Slowing is about actually beginning again to only manufacture quality and stuff that can actually last long. And there's a huge potential in actually starting to again only producing and consuming quality. And closing is then closing the loops, that is having value creation and value streams that are based on the recycling of materials and of using only renewable resources and materials. And actually, circular economy is the oldest concept we know as humanity. So it's only these last 150, 200 years that we actually have really begun living and producing in a linear way. So my thesis here is that in its full consequence, the truly circular society is actually using, of course, materials that already exist, and it will link production and consumption together in a narrow and also more local way. So this is, there's a lot of obviously figures and ways of trying to grasp the complexity when you get to work with circular economy in practice. This is the circle that we use in lifestyle and design cluster where I work. If you go through all these phases, a lot of these phases actually, can be way or can have this perspective of turning what is right now perhaps global or international value streams into more local ones. There are a lot of these aspects and places that actually point towards a more localized, more local and regional economy, which I think is very interesting. Of course, in order to save the planet, to keep ourselves within the planetary borders, but also in respect to democracy and regaining, re-empowering local communities. Actually, I think there's a huge and very interesting potential in this. Talking as a Dane from our history of cooperative movement that perhaps has been or was the most prevailing and perhaps more fully fleshed out cooperative society that has been seen on the globe. That would be my suggestion. 100 years ago in the farmlands of Denmark, we had a very, very thorough and very dominant cooperative way of organizing both the way we consume and the way we produced, and these things were to a large extent linked together. So in the future, I think a lot of supply streams and value creation could and should, would be my argument, be increasingly local. And that goes for food production and consumption, also durable goods, maintenance, repair, and refurbish. I mean, take stuff like electrical appliances, washing machines, laundry machines. I mean, 90% of what a laundry machine consists of, you can actually build in a way that can make it last for 100 years. The wearable parts are actually quite few and quite cheap. So if we actually really optimize resource use, then we didn't have to produce new stuff to the extent we actually do right now. Energy production and storage with new technologies, solar, wind, and other kinds of energy, renewable energy production will be and have the possibility of being increasingly locally controlled and locally produced. Building and facility maintenance. Once you took the traditional way of building a house, has always been quite local, using local materials and of course local competences, and a lot of developments within building and facility maintenance is actually pointing to the direction of more local value creation. And then, of course, the whole idea of recycling materials, turning them into secondary materials. A lot of technological breakthroughs has been done or in the process of being done that actually will allow us to recycle a number of very important materials so that they can stay within the local regional economy. Things like wood, metals, plastics, textiles, fibers. And then saving and loans. In the old days, we had local saving and loans banks that actually were a very transparent way of dealing with money and surplus and need of borrowing. And in very many ways, what we have now is a financial system that has gone rogue, that has become far too independent, and a whole industry in its own, with no really clear value creation for the huge part of the population worldwide. Manufacturing capacities nowadays can be distributed locally. We can begin to share manufacturing capacities. 3D printing and other kinds of new manufacturing techniques allows us actually to downscale production in very many areas. And of course, the whole notion of going from owning to leasing and sharing also has strong local and regional perspectives. I don't think I have the time right now, but I can return to these. These are some of my favorite case stories about companies, still typically small, medium-sized companies that really are working with the circular business model. And just let me point out a couple of them. Plastics, there's a Danish company that are harvesting plastic from the oceans. Sea nets, nylon from sea nets, that's their raw material. And this raw material they process and turn into recyclable plastics that are used in an increasing number of products, textiles and furniture and so forth.
If we could maybe ask you, Kim, can you put these names in the chat so people can Google them afterwards, because it's super interesting, and I think there's a lot of resources to research.
Yeah, I can do that with this. Well, I can do that afterwards. But
do that afterwards. That would be generous of you.
So just another. Hvid, which is the second here, is actually a Danish furniture brand that uses plastic from plastics, that is like re-harvested ocean plastic in their chairs, and they use this plastic and recycled steel for their very beautiful and simple and well-designed furniture chairs. And so Hvid is an example of a company that has like born circular. They only want to produce circular furniture, and they are having increasing success commercially also. These other case examples are really interesting. Each have their own stories, and each are close to having really 100% circularity.
Cool.
So this is a chair some of you might know, but actually a chair like this, the Y chair, designed by Dana and produced since in 70, 80 years, it's been produced. It's an example of craftsmanship and design, and actually quite a sustainable product using massive wood and organic material for the seat, and a very, very small amount of glue. This chair is actually built to be able to last 100 years. Once you maintain it, you can replace parts, and it has a design that you are actually really, you're not growing tired of it, and you can hand it over, sell it and then keep it into the economy for a very long time. Same with this, it's another little Danish brand, or a Danish brand called Better World Fashion. They make leather jackets and other leather items out of reused leather, and they can really, because of the use of also digital design and digital cuttings, they can make very, very nice styles using all different kinds of patches, small pieces of used leather, turning them into these beautiful. Yeah,
that's super cool. It's very inspiring, and there's so many things happening right now. We just need to make sure that they're actually being the mainstream instead of the acceptance in a very, very short time. But we need to give the floor to Joshua. Thank you for being here again. Yeah, share with us.
Great. Hello, everybody. It's been very interesting, all the concepts from around the world, and to see how what I have been practicing in Africa relates very much to what Bildung is all about. So my talk is going to revolve around the way we see sustainability from the indigenous point of view, and also what we refer to when we hear the word economy, because this word in English is imposed and many people in the local villages, they don't understand what people are talking about. So we cannot, from our perspective, talk about sustainability or even economy without two things coming up: equity and resilience. So for us, the secret matrix that keeps a system flowing is, we call it rituals, or going back to the roots. The things that we do to keep a cycle flowing in harmony. And this is, we could say, they are very ancient or outdated, archaic systems. But what we realize about systems is that they take into account things like integration, diversity, inclusion. We've talked in other sessions a lot about connection, connectivity, respect of other people's cultures. So connecting even the generation gap is the most important, because I don't know where I stopped, but I was talking about how going back to the roots connects with modern technology in a way, because no past, no present. Our present is shaky because it's not on solid foundation. The roots are maybe not there, and the slightest wind is devastation. We are looking straight into it. So when I was talking about connection, it's about how the ancestors, when we call ancestors, is how the wisdom that is handed down to our elders, who know how to bring it to the youth. And this, for us, is collective wisdom. It's not a hierarchical system. So I learned to practice through my own initiation to bring this to young people, to go through this ritual that we call rite of passage, where education is not about science, but about upbringing. And I think this is what we are facing today, problems of mindset. This conditioning is really what we call education. In the morning, I talked a bit about how the spiritual forest remains a very strong concept, which I have used to bring back young people on the right pathway. They find it themselves because we are so much about teaching. So what we do is giving back the education to the learner because it belongs to everybody. So we are now using the concept of eco-village, which is not new. We are simply harvesting the heritage, transitioning the traditional villages to resilience. That's why I mentioned that resilience is very important. Then, living with nature is the upbringing of the young people to understand that they are from nature. They are not artificial beings. Aspects of sharing the surplus of the universe, of the world. Everything is free. We are now selling oxygen in hospitals. It means there is something somewhere that's gone wrong in the system. We sell water. We sell food. So food is our love economy. If somebody is going to get married, we bring food or we give cows. The concept of money is still not very present. So what I found very interesting was that these pockets of living knowledge, which still works, exist. And we're barely connecting them using the permaculture principles. So it's about the inner and outer ecology. This is also a cycle. It's about green skills that create green economies. So Mama Manfella was really talking a lot about how Ubuntu is a total way of life. And I see with her, the total way of life is no longer in the pockets of division that we have created. We carved out Africa, we carved out the world. In fact, we carved what we call the North, or the civilized, or the undersea, or the less. These artificial carvings that we are making and creating these divisions create this disharmony in this circular. I don't know, when we talk of circular, what do we really mean? These are issues that need to be examined from all the perspectives. So for me, I always like a discussion, like how realizing that we need to connect, not only close the intergenerational gap, but also the digital gap, because I am struggling. I've put a link on my name. So if you click on it, you can see a bit how I think that it's also something I'm proposing to build on, that we need the technology to connect these pockets of knowledge that exist. Because when we divide the world, we know that the communication infrastructure does not exist. So anything can happen in the darkness. So for that reason, we can assume that Africa is that continent, nothing good can come from it. So in fact, we don't need to see what is happening there. Like the second genocide that is going on in Cameroon today, and that the world would come back maybe after some years to say that They didn't know about it. Whereas we are in a digital age. So these are some of the issues that I think bringing people together like this, I think it's Bildung is maybe the light that is reaching out to the world, but it's not connected. So how is it going to touch all the various parts of the world?
Thank you so much. That's a super interesting question, and I think it's a perfect question to conclude this presentation round.